There's a kind of sadness that doesn't cry out. It waits. It doesn't interrupt your day. It becomes your day, like fog in the lungs, like weight behind the eyes. It sits beside you in silence, not asking for anything, just hoping you'll notice it. You keep moving, keep pretending. You get good at smiling just enough, laughing just right. People say you're strong, and maybe you are. But strength here feels like acting. And deep down, something in you aches, not for attention, but for truth. You weren't born hiding. That came later. Came when being sensitive made people uncomfortable. Came when your softness was mistaken for fragility. So you built armor, learned to minimize your feelings, to filter your words, to disappear just enough to survive. But sadness never really leaves, does it? It waits in the quiet moments, at night, when the world stops demanding, in the shower, where your tears can mix with the water. In songs you play on repeat, not because they're happy, but because they understand. You've called it weakness. You've tried to distract yourself from it, fix it, outrun it. But what if it's not a flaw to heal? What if it's a truth waiting to be heard? There's a reason you feel what you feel. And it's not because you're broken, it's because you're real. You were never meant to numb your way through life. You were meant to feel it, to carry the colors, the shadows, the echoes of what matters. This sadness in you, it's not asking for answers, it's asking for honesty, for a moment where you stop pretending and let yourself exist without armor. And maybe, just maybe, it's not the beginning of a breakdown, but the beginning of your becoming. What if this heaviness you carry is the most honest part of you? And what if, instead of escaping it, you listened? You learned to edit yourself early, to tone it down, to smooth the edges, to make sure your sadness didn't make anyone uncomfortable, to carry your pain like it was your fault for feeling it too deeply. They said, "Don't be so dramatic. You're too sensitive. Others have it worse." So you swallowed it all, your truth, your tears, your quiet ache. And little by little, you became someone the world could handle, but not someone you could recognize. You began to speak in half-truths, smile when you didn't mean it, nod in agreement just to keep the peace. You turned your pain into performance, and your silence into survival. This is how the prison forms, not with bars or chains, but with smiles that aren't yours. With, "I'm fine," said 100 different ways. With days spent wearing the version of you they expect, instead of the one you actually are. You became fluent in pretending, and the world clapped for it. They praised your strength, your resilience, your composure. But inside you knew, they weren't applauding you, they were applauding the mask. And that mask, as light as it looks, weighs more than any truth you've ever carried. Every time you denied your sadness, you were telling a part of yourself, "You don't belong here. You're too much. You need to stay hidden." So that sadness didn't disappear. It just learned how to whisper, in anxiety, in numbness, in the feeling that no matter where you are, you're never really home. You live in a kind of invisible theater, where no one sees the script you're stuck in, but you feel it, scene after scene, the pressure to perform, the fear of disappointing, the exhaustion of being what they want instead of who you are. And maybe you've forgotten what your real voice even sounds like. Not the one that pleases, the one that trembles when it speaks the truth. The one that says, "I'm not okay, and I don't need to be perfect to deserve love." This is the cost of self-denial. You lose connection not just with others, but with the core of your being. The Buddhist path calls this false self, a mask layered by fear and conditioning. It's not evil, it's not wrong. It was just your way of surviving a world that didn't know how to hold your depth. But survival isn't the same as living. And now, the sadness returns, not as punishment, but as a guide. It shows you the cracks in the mask, the ache of being unseen, the longing for something real, not applause, not perfection, but presence. It asks, what would happen if you stopped hiding? What if you let your sadness speak, and you listened, without trying to fix it? Because maybe your sadness isn't the enemy. Maybe it's the part of you that's still honest, still alive, still waiting for you to come home. You don't need to perform for healing. You don't need to be palatable to be worthy. And you don't need to silence your soul just to be accepted. The real you is still here, beneath the roles, the masks, the fear. And it's not too late to return to the part of you that feels too much, the part they told you to shrink, the part that still believes there's something sacred in sadness. Because there is. There always was. You just weren't allowed to see it. Until now. If no one ever really asked before, I'm asking now. What has your sadness been trying to say all this time? Write it below like no one's watching. No filters. No masks. Just your truth. Raw, quiet, real. This space is yours. Sadness doesn't knock on the door loudly. It seeps in. Like rain through old windows. Like silence after a goodbye that never came with closure. It doesn't ask for permission. It arrives in your bones, in the heaviness behind your eyes, in the way you look at your reflection and feel distant. You call it sadness, but it's more than that. It's memory. It's every "I'm fine" you said when you weren't. Every night you cried softly so no one would hear. It's the weight of being unseen in a world that only loves the loud, the bright, the easy to understand. No one told you this, but sadness is intelligent. It remembers things your mind tries to forget. It stores moments in your chest, the way someone's voice changed when they stopped loving you, the hollow of promises that never grew into actions, the slow fading of someone who once made you feel like home. And this sadness you carry now, it might not belong only to today. It might be echoes from years ago, wounds you didn't know were still open, soft grief for versions of you that were never allowed to exist. In Buddhist practice, this is not pathology, it's presence. Pain is not seen as an obstacle to peace, it's a passage, a call inward, a mirror that shows you what you truly long for, what you've been protecting, what you still haven't allowed yourself to grieve. The world rushes us to move on, to smile faster, heal faster, but grief has no clock, and healing is not a race, it's a rhythm. One only your soul can hear. And maybe you're not broken. Maybe you're just backed up with truths you've never been allowed to say out loud. You were never too much. You were just never in a place that knew how to hold your more. This sadness isn't your enemy. It's the honest part of you that never learned how to lie. It shows up when you're tired of pretending, when your soul is asking for something real. And in that asking, something changes. You stop running from the ache. You start being with it. You begin to realize pain isn't the opposite of peace, it's the invitation to it. In every cracked open moment, there's the chance to soften instead of harden, to breathe instead of brace, to feel instead of flee. Existential psychology calls this integration, the process of welcoming what hurts, not to indulge it, but to know it, to hold your pain without trying to erase it. Because maybe you don't need to fix yourself. Maybe you need to sit beside yourself like a friend who finally listens. What if your sadness isn't here to ruin your life, but to return you to it, to show you what matters, to lead you back to what's real, to crack the surface of the false calm you've learned to wear like skin? Sometimes we break down not because we're weak, but because we've outgrown the container we were placed in. Your pain is the stretch, the opening, the signal that you can't keep living from a version of you that doesn't feel like home. So if you're feeling heavy, let that heaviness speak, not in shouting, but in truth. Let it write itself into your day. Let it move through you like the river it is, not meant to be controlled, only followed. And as it moves, you just might hear something under the noise, a whisper, a memory, a truth you forgot you knew. You're allowed to feel all of it. You're not too much. You're still here, and that means something. This isn't your ending, it's your becoming. And sadness is simply the part of you brave enough to stay honest through it all, letting go. Two words that sound like surrender, that feel like loss, that scare the part of you that still believes holding on is how you prove you care. You were never taught the kind of freedom that doesn't look like winning. You were taught to endure, to cling, to grip every emotion, every hope, every version of yourself, until your hands bled with the weight of needing control. But letting go isn't defeat, it's clarity. It's when you stop carrying what was never yours to hold. The roles, the expectations, the pressure to be unshakably okay. In the Buddhist path, release isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the soft exhale after years of holding your breath for someone else's comfort. It's the moment you realize you can exist without performing. Letting go means you stop gripping sadness like it's your only proof of depth. You stop seeking validation for every wound. You stop apologizing for being tired. You don't become indifferent. You become honest. Because how long can you keep trying to be understood in a language that was never yours to begin with? There's a deeper freedom, the one that comes when you stop needing to be read correctly by others and finally read yourself with compassion. You start to understand, not every emotion needs an audience. Not every pain needs to be carried forever. Not every should belongs to your story. You were taught to strive for perfection, but what if it's peace you actually crave? There's a moment in every life, quiet, subtle, usually overlooked, where you realize the only thing standing between you and yourself is the version of you trying so hard to be accepted. And when you let that version fall away, what's left is real, raw, beautiful in a way no mask could ever be. It's not about being emotionless, it's about being unburdened. You stop chasing closure that may never come. You stop rehearsing who you need to be in order to be loved. You allow space for stillness, for sadness, for sudden joy. Letting go doesn't mean you no longer care. It means you trust that what's true will stay and what's not never really belonged. You begin to live from your center, not the center they designed for you. The quiet place inside you that knows how to breathe again, how to rest without guilt, how to be soft without being small. And in that softening, you begin to feel your life again. Not the curated one, the real one. You walk differently when you're not trying to prove your worth. You speak differently when you no longer need to convince anyone you're okay. You feel the ground under your feet, not because everything's perfect, but because you're finally grounded in yourself. And that is freedom. Not the loud kind, not the kind on posters or podcasts, but the quiet, steady freedom of no longer betraying your truth. You start choosing things that feel light, conversations that nourish, people who see you without needing you to shrink. You start trusting life again, not because it always makes sense, but because you no longer need it to. There's a paradox here. The moment you stop trying to be enough is the moment you realize you already are. Letting go isn't the end of caring. It's the beginning of being with your breath, being with your sadness without judgment, being with life without needing to force it into something neater, prettier, more acceptable. You loosen the grip, and what you feared would fall apart often falls into place. The truth is, what is real doesn't need to be chased. What is yours doesn't need to be controlled. And your sadness, it doesn't need to be erased to make you lovable. It just needs to be seen, held, allowed. That's what letting go really is. Not losing yourself, but finally, coming home. There's a silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels like arriving, like returning to a part of you that never stopped waiting. After all the noise, the fixing, the performing, the trying to be okay, there comes a moment where you just stop. Not because you gave up, but because something deeper in you whispered, this isn't the way anymore. In Buddhism, this is the breath beneath the breath, the place where effort dissolves, where you stop clinging to meaning and start living it. This silence, it doesn't demand, it invites. It doesn't fix you, it reminds you. You were never broken. There's a stillness that comes after the storm, not because everything is resolved, but because you're no longer resisting the rain. You sit with your sadness, not to solve it, but to hear what it's been whispering all along. I just wanted to be felt. And when you feel it, truly feel it, without turning away, without trying to polish it into something prettier, you begin to heal in a way no advice ever gave you. This is what it means to surrender to reality. Not resignation, not giving in, but releasing the war against your own soul. You stop needing to outrun your past. You stop needing to escape the present. You let your emotions be guests at your table. even the ones that show up with trembling hands and tear-stained faces. And you realize peace was never the absence of sadness. It was the absence of resistance to sadness. You no longer need to be the person who holds it all together. You become the person who holds space for it all. Even the parts you used to hate, even the moments you thought would break you. You start to see beauty in the cracked places, in the vulnerability that once embarrassed you, in the tears you once wiped away quickly, afraid someone would notice. Now, you let them fall. Not as weakness, but as reverence. Because there's something holy in finally allowing what's real to rise. You stop searching for the next fix, the next answer, the next way to prove you're healed. Instead, you listen. You let your breath carry you. You let your presence speak louder than your story. You let this moment, this exact, imperfect human moment, be enough. You sit in the silence and discover that it's not empty. It's full of every truth you were too afraid to say. Full of every version of you that just wanted to be accepted. And in this stillness, something shifts. You no longer need to be understood to feel whole. You no longer need to explain your sadness to validate it. You no longer need to apologize for the depth of your feelings. You simply exist as you are. No edits, no masks, no more pretending. And the world doesn't fall apart. It softens because you've softened. This is the quiet revolution. To stop fighting yourself. To stop needing a reason for your pain. To stop demanding constant joy and start embracing honest peace. And maybe, for the first time, you understand. Your sadness was never the enemy. It was the beginning. It brought you here, to this breath, to this stillness, to this sacred returning. So now, you don't need to chase meaning. You become it. You don't need to fix your story. You honor it. And you don't need to keep fighting for love. Because you found it. Not in others, not in achievements, but in the radical act of finally being with yourself. So if you're tired, rest here. If you're hurting, let that hurt breathe. And if you're still holding on to the idea that your sadness makes you weak, look again. It brought you here. It made you listen. It showed you what's real. And maybe, just maybe, it's not something to be erased. It's something to be revered. Because what if everything you've been trying to escape is the very thing that's been trying to set you free? What if all you need now is to stop fighting who you already are?